Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So we're going to spend the next hour and a half talking about how we can take all the information that we have out there about risk-based everything as the new approach and really utilize it in our day-to-day activities with monitoring. And keeping in mind that a risk-based approach is not something that's really new to clinical research. It's something that we certainly have done in auditing for years, looking and assessing where do we need to be focused. But as we know from the guidance that the FDA provided and a lot of the information that's going back and forth out there, that we're really incorporating this into our monitoring processes as well. Now, risk-based thinking is an interesting thought, so to speak, because we know that our day-to-day activities are guided by a risk-based approach. We have to think about what we need to do, when we need to do it, what we should be doing. And our approach really is based on, what's the payoff? What's the risk? What happens if I do this? But oftentimes we find in research, in clinical research in particular, that we are used to following patterns and we do what we know. And really that risk-based approach that the FDA has put upon us, as well as other regulatory bodies. We have a handout from the EMA, really incorporating ICH-Q9, really taking ICH-Q9 and just substituting information about clinical research rather than that manufacturing piece. So it's that risk-based approach. So we want to take this information that's out there and really use it in a practical way for how we would apply it in our day-to-day activities for monitoring. So as Elizabeth said, if you have any questions as we go along, we are going to keep an eye out for those in the chat panel. But don't hesitate to ask those in the chat, or you can raise your electronic hand. So we're going to talk about some of the auditing techniques we can use when we're monitoring, some we are already using, and some that we can utilize, whether by ourselves or in conjunction with others. We'll talk about proper monitoring and who's responsible for ensuring that it takes place. We're going to look at some of the monitoring findings that the FDA has seen. We'll talk about some of the ones that we see as well, and really put them back within the context of regulatory risk. We're going to review a protocol and some selection criteria and endpoint information and talk through what we should be focused on, and then juxtapose that against a standard monitoring report template. And we can see where we're not always able to capture all the information that we would like to have to really be able to answer our questions and to ensure proper monitoring. So we will look at that report template and talk about ways to adapt it to make it more meaningful and really to help it fit that risk-based approach and use it as a compliance tool. We'll look at some processes for discerning patterns in our findings and, of course, making sure that we are working through the monitoring process to know where to look for those patterns to begin with. And then talk about monitoring tools that we can use to develop a systems review and communication, because risk, as we'll see, is about risk review, risk communication. There are a lot of elements to risk management, it's not just a buzzword as we hear sometimes, like CAPA. People think that that's the new buzzword, but these are processes. And that's what's critical to understand as we go forward, that we're having to change how we think about the tasks that we do and the work that we do and how it fits in with all the other individuals doing their work as well. So basic definitions out of the gate, which I'm sure you're familiar with. An audit, a systematic and independent examination of trial-related activities to make sure that we have compliance. Usually we conduct these we're hoping to do them more prospectively and more real-time, but we know that historically they have been conducted more after the fact. We come in when there's a problem, or we come in at the close of those studies. But we want to focus on the fact that it is a systematic review, certainly an independent review, but a systematic review. And quality assurance is where we find auditing, and they're planned and systematic actions that we take to make sure that compliance is being achieved from all parties. Monitoring, of course, is also involved in assessing compliance. It is the act of overseeing the progress of a trial and making sure that it is being conducted, recorded, and reported in accordance with those guidelines and regulations.